Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Project Infinite podcast, the podcast covering the entire multiverse of fandom, from movies, comics, TV shows, video games. We got you covered. I'm Rob. I'm here as always with Courtney. And Courtney, we're starting a trilogy of sorts this week.
Yes, I had to do some heavy lifting. I had to move heaven and earth to get this done, but we are starting off with a bang. We're starting off with one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. We're reviewing Man of Steel.
Yeah.
After much fight where I wanted to review Superman Returns, but we ended on Man of Steel.
Yeah, so we're going to do a film retrospective on Man of Steel, covering the first entry into the weird Zack Snyder trilogy of sorts of DC films.
Yeah.
But first, some news and some trailers. So because we recorded last week's episode earlier than usual, we missed the Moon Knight trailer, and we missed out on talking about it. So yeah, the Moon Knight trailer came out, and it's definitely something.
Yeah, it is. It looks... The first part of the trailer, you know, it's very, very ominous, you don't really know what's going on, but as soon the second where Khonshu shows up and he's starting to walk after him, I'm like, oh yeah, we might get some really special content right here. So basically, Mark Spector, he is Steven something, I can't remember what his name is. So basically in the comics, Mark Spector's, his personality is basically split. So he has a taxi driver version of himself, he has a billionaire, playboy, whatever Iron Man said, version of himself, and he has his actual Mark Spector, the son of, I believe, I can't remember who his father was, but I know he's basically a mercenary that was kind of set up and left to die, but then got possessed basically by a moon god, Khonshu, and turns into Moon Knight when he goes out. So he's not Batman, but he's drawn some similarities. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, Oscar Isaac, again, stroke of genius to have that be your I thought he was done with Disney. After Star Wars, I thought he was never going to touch a Disney product.
And I thought he was done with Marvel after X-Men.
Yeah, I thought, but then you got to sell him on the machine, which is the MCU. So tell him, hey man, you're never going to have to touch that. You're never going to have to touch that Apocalypse suit ever again. We'll actually make you a credible hero, and we're going to let you have some fun. And again, I always say, and I told you the last couple of weeks, I don't think Ethan Hawke does this without Oscar Isaac too. So one of my personal favorite actors of all time, Ethan Hawke, signed on to be the villain of this. I don't know who he's playing. Maybe this is original creation. Maybe this is a combination of some people. So yeah, fun trailer. That second half of the trailer really got me intrigued. That was as soon as I kind of like the disconnected nature, which is, built into the source material, but I just think that I would really want not a lot of other actors than Oscar Isaac to portray Mark Spector.
Yeah, and I said this when the trailer came out, like, I'm glad that we just got to this point with Marvel where it's just like, yeah, here's a Moon Knight show.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, 10 years ago, this would have never happened.
Right. So we have Thor's brother. Here's a TV show. Basically some B to C list heroes. Scarlet Witch and Vision, here's a show. Like, it's just...
The Midnight Suns are possibly getting a TV show?
Yeah, and I think that one's probably better off. I believe that probably is going to be a movie at some point. I can definitely...
But even that's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts that we're at this point. I mean, I always say this too. We really were dealing with the B list of characters. The most notable one was probably Captain America and Hulk, maybe, and maybe Thor, because Iron Man was never really A-list up until like the mid-2000s, right? So you built this entire universe without your two heavy hitters, which are the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. And
Spider-Man.
And Spider-Man. And look where you are now. Now you're in the perfect position.
Now you're doing everything.
Yeah, now you're doing everything. So I just watched Eternals the other day, and that post-credit scene still gets me super excited. I mean, again, Mahershala Ali as Blade is just another level of casting. And I mean, same goes for Dane Whitman, our boy from Game of Thrones. That's another stroke of genius, just to make sure you have all these prominent actors playing these, not the biggest comic book characters of all time, but people that really could have the potential for a lot of fans to kind of grow with.
Exactly. And also shout out to mid-2000s people.
Right.
Hearing that Kid Cudi.
Yeah.
That Kid Cudi in the trailer.
Right. That was great. Great.
Yeah, so that comes out March
26th.
26th will be the first episode of Moon Knight, and I don't know if we know. I mean, I'm sure if we looked it up, we would know how many episodes it is. I expect it to be in that.
It's 6 episodes.
It's 6. Okay.
That, yeah. So I think Marvel's going to keep that formula, because I think they saw what they did with WandaVision, and then they immediately saw what they did with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki, and then they said, yeah, this format works much better.
Yeah, and I mean, WandaVision was a unique case.
Yeah, right.
Considering it's that first block of episodes where were basically 25-minute sitcom episodes.
Right. And 1 through 3 really felt like its own episode, all encapsulated into one. It's once you hit episode 3 is when you start to bleed into everything else, and then 4 through 9 basically were your actual 6-episode arc.
Exactly. So. What else we got? Oh, The Rock. Everyone's favorite everyman.
Yeah.
The Rock, who does everything.
Right.
Is dipping his toes back into the video game movie genre.
Oh no, we're getting Doom again?
We did Dune earlier this year.
No, not Dune. Somebody call Carl Urban. We'll run it back.
Yeah, so The Rock is apparently doing a video game movie, and I have the exact quote here because I don't want to mess it up. I can't tell you which game in particular we're doing, but here will be an announcement this year. We're going to bring one of the biggest, most badass games to the screen, one that I've played for years. I'm really excited to bring it to fans around the world. Of course, we're going to do right by our gamer friends, but really, we're just going to make a great movie. Yeah. I don't know, man. The Rock, every time he signs on for something, he's like, it's the biggest thing ever.
Right. And then it's pretty decent.
Yeah, that is not bad.
Right.
So I don't know what this could be. I'm just picking.
They wouldn't have him play Kratos, would they?
Would they not?
I mean,
it's kind of his bag, isn't it?
It really is in his bag. He's already got the look down. He really does. He's got the voice down even, probably. He could probably pull that voice off.
Yeah, it's I'm thinking it's got to be something like that, or it's going to be like Gears of War, potentially.
Right. I mean, I already know who I want to. We already kind of agreed upon when we talked about the Northman that I wanted Robert Eggers to direct the God of War movie. That would be just absolutely amazing and mind-boggling. So maybe he works with The Rock.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. He did Doom, so anything's possible, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I'm down for pretty much anything The Rock's in. I don't know.
Yeah. The guy, he sells. Though that's never.
Oh man, he's bulletproof.
Yeah, he is bulletproof. He's gonna be super bulletproof when he plays Black Adam too. So,
which I'm really excited for.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun one. Those DC solo movies, they're something which I'm gonna get to later in this episode. Later, gonna have some fun with that.
Speaking of video games, so Respawn has pretty much announced that they're helming 3 different Star Wars games, leading with a potential sequel to Jedi Fallen Order.
Yes, so what I saw is we're getting, like you said, the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, one of my favorite games of all time, I think. We're getting a Star Wars first-person shooter. So
that's not Battlefront?
Yeah, that's not Battlefront, so that's going to be interesting. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is going to have to do something with the Mandalorians because of how popular they've become in the last 3 years.
That's very likely,
and
I would say.
A strategy game. So
yeah, like a real-time strategy, kind of, if you've ever played Civilization or like StarCraft, anything like that. That's basically what that's going to be, which is, fits pretty neatly into the Star Wars canon. Right. I mean, there's a Dune one coming out later this year. That's a real-time strategy game. So, Star Wars not letting Dune move in on its territory.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, as soon as Dune gets a little bit of breathing room,
Star Wars hey.
Back. Yeah, you guys want a Boba Fett show? I don't care that you were the biggest movie besides Spider-Man in 2021.
But yeah, the Star Wars Jedi one is the big one, right? Because same director is coming back.
Yep.
That did Fallen Order. Same director who also, by the way, did God of War.
Right. Cameron Monaghan, obviously.
Yeah. That'll be interesting to see if it picks up where Cal Kestis' story leaves off. It's going to be something new entirely.
Right.
They made it's kind of a wonky title. Like, it's called Star Wars Jedi: Fallen Order, and they said that this new game is going to be in the Star Wars Jedi kind of line. So I don't know if it's going to be something new, if they're going to come back with Cal Kestis. I mean, there's definitely more to his story, I would imagine.
Right.
But, and we've talked about this before, whether or not Disney is going to have something to say about the arc of that character also.
Yeah. They might be able to step in and, have like a backdoor call that says, hey, this is the extent because we made sure that we casted a pretty well-known actor in this role just to make sure if we want to use him in live action we can, which I still think we will in some way, shape, or form before maybe, I don't know, 2025 or 2030, whenever. We're gonna see him in live action. It's too convenient that you cast an actor like that and not have him in live action.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, cool. We talked about needing new Star Wars things, and I'm with you on the first-person shooter being something related to either The Mandalorian or the Mandalorians in general, some type of bounty hunter game. I mean, there was that story from years ago that it was, I think the Uncharted devs were working on a game called Star Wars 1313, which was going to be basically a Boba Fett game.
Right.
And then it got shelved indefinitely and was decommissioned. So maybe the bones of that are going to be implemented into this first-person shooter. So, cool. Speaking of Disney, man, my segues are just on point today. Percy Jackson is back.
Yes, my childhood's coming back.
Yeah, Percy Jackson and the Olympians has been greenlit for Disney Plus.
What's your exposure to Percy Jackson?
My exposure to Percy Jackson comes off the back of being someone who was growing up in like the Harry Potter era. So like Percy Jackson felt very not like it was discount Harry Potter because it's two kind of different genres, but like it felt like to me, like at the time, it was trying to bank in on like what Harry Potter did. Right. Like it took this popular young adult fantasy franchise and turned it into a movie. So I was kind of not turned off by it, but it wasn't my bag.
Right, and it's funny you say that because this was my bag when I was a kid growing up, because I guess I was growing up as these books were coming out, so these books were pretty good. I mean, Rick Riordan really gave us some pretty solid fiction as a kid, and something that I remember I saw this tweet and people said, I feel like we need to explore Greek mythology because how much of a stranglehold it has on modern day mythology and whatever kind of, cliches and legends that we have, so much of it stems from that too. So it would be really interesting. I'm excited for this. I actually do want to see what they do with this. I mean, Netflix really hardly misses, especially with something like this. So as long as they get a good showrunner, solid directors, and I mean, the next big thing is who's going to play Percy Jackson. I have a sneaking suspicion, I have a sneaking fan cast of who I want to play Percy Jackson, but I don't know if he's too rough and rugged to do it. I'm thinking about 5 from the Umbrella Academy to play Percy Jackson. I don't know if he's too... Because, I mean, Damian Wayne is calling his name for eventually when it kind of stinks that we're not going to see Ben Affleck after the Flash movie, but I can definitely see Ben Affleck being that kid's dad, but I could see him as a Percy Jackson type. Young enough where he can be like that 16-year-old around age where, you find out your father's Poseidon, so I guess that would shake up anybody's life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good kind of story to build the TV show off of. And I think it's a smart idea to do a TV show. Right. Because the films, where the first one was received pretty well, and then they kind of downturned sharply after that. Right. So, yeah, I mean... And it's a good time to do it because, like I said, that market back then got so oversaturated. Yeah, it was, because, everybody was doing a young adult novel adaptation to a film. We had the Harry Potter films, which was, that was first. That was the one. Then you had, Percy Jackson. Then you had the Hunger Games.
And then the Hunger Games basically turned into what Harry Potter was, just a couple years later. Yep. Divergent.
You had the Maze Runner. Right. The market was just all over the place. Right. So now we don't have so much of that.
No, and I don't think they're going to take that approach. I mean, that young adult era is done, and it's kind of replaced by this, Stranger Things / Euphoria kind of, threshold that we're in. That's very, we're going to make it kind of more real to how actual teenagers act instead of kind of, not babying them down, but kind of having it a little bit more level set where it's supposed to be for people those age, that's not how kids those age act, but yeah, like I said, I can't wait. I'm actually pretty on board with the show. It's a great time to kind of do something like that. And yeah, once we get that first bit of casting, and I just want to know who the showrunner is, that's what's going to probably dictate the excitement.
It's also a good thing for Disney Plus. Yeah. To be developing a property and a thing that isn't a Star Wars thing and isn't a Marvel thing. Right. Because that was always the thing with Disney Plus, right? Where people were like, okay, cool, I'm paying for the library of Disney films, which is cool for my nostalgia, but how much am I gonna really watch it unless I have kids, which I don't, but and then obviously the new Marvel content, the new Star Wars content, but what else is there beyond that? So it's cool that they're kind of diving into these other properties, that maybe they, and to be fair, I mean, HBO has the Harry Potter rights, you know what I mean? So Disney's kind of got to counterpunch with something.
Right. And this could be it.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I definitely think so. And then my last bit of news, which I probably should have switched that, but Mary Elizabeth Winstead is in Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is my confession that I love her and she's one of my favorite actresses because I've already talked about my praise for Birds of Prey and how I think that's actually a really solid action movie. The action in that movie I think it's top tier in Hollywood. I thought it was really well done. And she's so secretly hilarious in that movie where I can't wait to see this. I think she kind of has that she has that Keanu Reeves energy that's like a little bit more refined in my opinion. It's very
That's fair.
Yeah, she's very kind of calm and collected, but I love when she kind of rages out. I love how in Birds of Prey she's just you have rage issues. She just screams I don't have rage issues. I love how she's practicing in the mirror how to say I'm the huntress. It's great. It's really good. I think she's a really solid actress. I think she was in that movie Kate that's on Netflix. I think I started that movie and it's not the greatest movie in the world, but I think she does every performance she kind of gives her all too. So I remember back in the Sky High days when I was a kid, man, and now look at her. So why is she playing Asajj Ventress is my question, because that's who I think she could be playing.
That's a really good guess, and I think you might be right, because that is another character kind of like Ahsoka, who's one of the hangovers from the animated Star Wars canon. It's her, it's Thrawn, it's Ezra. It's pretty much that core Rebels group that pretty much people latch onto. Right. So I think it would be cool to see Asajj Ventress in live action. All right, I guess it's time, right? It's
time. So, just a bit of context. I've been annoying Rob for the last week of our lives about this. I've been so excited to talk about this movie, and I have no rhyme or reason. So we all have those movies where you just get that feeling. Those movies or shows or whatever it is, that music where you just get that feeling. It's not something that's super concrete, but you just can't help but think this is the best thing ever.
It takes you to another plane of existence, right? It's that property that you feel so strongly for that maybe nobody else feels that strongly for or feels that strongly about. Maybe it's you and a handful of other people, or you feel like it's you and a handful of other people. But the truth is that there's usually thousands of people that feel the same way that you do. But within your circle, you're usually the only person that feels that passionately about this.
I am the only one in our circle that feels this way about this movie, because everybody's on this train that the Snyder movies are bad, and I disagree. I don't think it's that simple. So here's also the other thing that I think he gets a little bit of flack for. I think people generalize things a little too much, so it's either
really you don't say.
Yeah, these movies are just bad or these movies are just great. There's no gray area, where even the Marvel movies themselves have a lot of those movies have a lot of gray area where it's just not as simple as this is a bad movie or a good movie. You talk about Thor 1. Thor 1's got some solid moments. Captain Marvel's got some movies that people don't like. I never think it's as simple as this is a bad movie or this is a good movie.
Right. It's never that simple, but people like to make it that simple because that's the age we live in.
Right. And that's probably going to be as evident as next week when we talk about Batman vs. Superman, because man, I will never forget when this movie got announced and then the lead up to this movie. It was the single most hyped movie of all time, because this was the first time Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were all together on the big screen. I mean, we talked about earlier, Iron Man and Captain America and Thor and Hulk, the Avengers, all that lead up. Those were your B-list heroes in comics. Those weren't your A-listers. Captain America was probably your closest thing to and Hulk were probably your closest things to A-listers that they had, but they weren't the Fantastic Four, they weren't the X-Men, they weren't Spider-Man, but this is it's even beyond that for Superman and Batman, because it's them two and Spider-Man are the prototype heroes. They're the archetype heroes that so much of media is staked in.
Superman is the first.
Yeah, he really is the blueprint for every hero that's ever come. Just the morals that you'll have as a hero. So, it's 2013. Promotions are ramping up. A young Court's just ready to see some good superhero content. I'm high off the Avengers. And I find out that Henry Cavill's playing Superman with Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder made The Watchmen. I probably watched The Watchmen when I was a little too young to.
Right.
I like that movie. It's cool. It's got some cool bits.
I mean, at least from what I can remember, from this, at least the original promotion, was that they didn't put Snyder's name on it first.
Right, yeah.
They put Nolan's name on it first.
Right, yep.
And that's on purpose.
Yeah, and I think we said something about that too, or at least I did. You can feel the Nolan influence in the first 2/3 of this movie. You can feel it. And it's more of like, because, so basically this movie has a little bit more to do with like, and basically the franchise up until Justice League, where it just turns into, you know, a more traditional superhero movie. That's one thing I will give them, is I will give Zack the punch of, I'll give him the credit of the punch he tried to take in terms of it's deeper than just being superheroes fighting supervillains. Like, there's more to that. But what I think happens is it was more of like an existential battle that kind of happened, and more of like a moral debate, which I appreciated. And then I can't wait till next week where I talk about one of my favorite Superman scenes, the should there be a Superman scene. But this movie, you can really feel that weight of kind of like, it feels so much different from the superhero content we were getting at the time.
Yeah. So Cavill's got an interesting journey to get here, right? Because he was cast in the doomed J.J. Abrams Superman flyby as Clark Kent.
Right.
This is I believe it's like 4 or 5 years before Man of Steel. So he's younger. And then that movie got ultimately shelved. And then he was considered for the role in Superman Returns in 2006. Lost out to Brandon Routh. So this is a role that Cavill had been circling for several years.
Yeah, he's got that look.
Yeah, he fits the Chris Reeves, Brandon Routh, you know, Tyler Hoechlin.
Yeah.
Like they all kind of look the same. Right. They all have the same type of mold. Mm-hmm. So that's where Cavill comes in, and I think he's head and shoulders the standout of this movie, as he should be. He's Superman, but you know, and one of my criticisms of this movie is that the rest of everybody outside of him and outside of Michael Shannon and outside of probably Kevin Costner.
I have another one that I want to add that I'd replace Kevin Costner, and that's Russell Crowe. I would probably replace the two of them as people that really stand out to me, but continue.
But everybody else is kind of flat, you know, in this. Everyone else is just kind of there and playing a role. But those three, and you can add Russell Crowe to that too, because he is great, really stand out in this movie.
I really enjoy Russell Crowe in this movie, so I guess let's start off right from the beginning. And I just want to talk about what I said before, and this felt so much different from other superhero content that we were getting. This one felt so much more kind of raw. Like, I even said some of the Smallville sequences, I love the way they shot it. It felt like almost like an indie version of what a superhero film would look like, or almost like this Superman running around, but kind of more in like a more contained way and just a more personal way. And I said, what that does for me personally, it kind of connects me more to him, and especially during those Smallville sequences, like, it gives me the feeling where like, oh, this feels a little bit more real than just like some billionaire in an iron suit getting something, or some billionaire just being depressed about his parents and making a bat suit. You know what I mean? Like, as funny as it sounds, like, that cinematography, it's like, I call, like, in my opinion, that's solid visual storytelling. Like, kind of, it's very poetic the way they do it. It's very intentional the way they frame their shots in the first kind of 2/3. Like, you're probably going to hear me talk about the first 2/3 of this movie a lot, because we'll get to the third act where it, you know, it turns into just see you later, Metropolis. Like, you're done for it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the hiccup in all of these Snyder films, is that third act just doesn't land.
Yeah, I mean, out of the third acts, it's funny enough, like, the Batman vs. Superman third act is probably, I think, it's weird because I would go back and probably rewatch that one the most, because I think it's got better, like, hit 'em moments, like better like high moments for it. But I think in terms of emotional impact, Man of Steel gets it. Even though Superman, you know, spoiler alert, dies, quote unquote, dies at the end of Batman vs. Superman. But I think Man of Steel, in terms of like a personal singular arc for a character, I think that one feels a little bit more landed. I think Batman vs. Superman has the better like superhero like good moments, and then Justice League has like, you know, the team. It's finally the team up of your heroes. So
yeah, so the beginning of this movie is pretty much setting the stage for what you know about Superman, right? Krypton is destabilized, you know, Jor-El is getting ready to ship Kal-El off to Earth, General Zod murders Jor-El.
Yeah. So let's talk about Michael Shannon real quick as the...
I would love to.
Yeah, as the villain of this movie, because he's real good. He's one of the more memorable villains in my opinion. What he kind of brings is Michael Shannon is like he's very unsettling to look at. Like it's very you always feel like
how dare you?
Yeah, no, in the best possible way because I really like Michael Shannon. Like that's a really good compliment in my opinion. Like he really is like unsettling. Like even what I like when movies do that because Willem Dafoe had the same thing in No Way Home where even when they're acting as if they're your friend or your ally for a second, you always get that whole like that kind of step back of I don't feel safe right now, no matter what he's doing, and he really plays that off, especially where he meets Clark for the first time and he's kind of trying to sell him on the whole idea where, you know, humans they're not Kryptonians, like, they're not strong enough to kind of live, like, we can just overtake them easily and just have our new Krypton here.
Or, like, you could overtake them, like, by yourself.
Right, exactly.
So just some fun facts about this, about the casting, what-ifs or alternatives. Two that come up are Viggo Mortensen and Daniel Day-Lewis, considered for the role of Zod.
Interesting. I'm glad Daniel Day-Lewis, because I love Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't think he would ever...
I don't think he would either.
Yeah, he would not do it. He wouldn't play like a villain. If he were to do it, I can see him as Jor-El. I feel like that would be a much better role for Daniel Day-Lewis. But, I mean, Viggo Mortensen probably would have kind of held his own as Zod. That would have been a good one, too. But I'm glad we got Michael Shannon. I think he does a really, really great job.
Yeah, I agree. So where else do you want to take this movie? Because there's a lot of things, a lot of places to go.
I mean, I kind of do want to talk about the Krypton sequence. I mean, what I'm going to talk about a lot here is the way this movie's shot. I think this movie's shot just exceptionally well, and especially, like I said, the first 2 acts of that movie, it's just that Krypton sequence. So the argument, obviously, is why. Like, we already know Krypton's going to blow up, but my whole thing is you get to kind of show off his lineage, because a lot of Superman properties are get him to Earth and make sure he's just from Earth. That's
the Krypton stuff is important in this, is because Jor-El is important in this,
right,
which he's typically not.
And it's also the technology and lore of Krypton itself. It's the most important it's ever been I think in any super property besides Supergirl. It's just because Supergirl lasted so long where they had to dip into it,
and because the whole genesis, Zod's whole plot revolves around turning Earth into Krypton.
Right.
So you have to be familiar with Krypton in a weird way, like as a viewer, to understand why Zod's plan is dumb.
Right, and I think another big, and you can kind of attest to this, another big thing about, visual media is show, don't tell. And I think the first part of this movie does an amazing job of showing us a lot of things and not just telling us straight up what's happening, or kind of marrying the two instead of just, this has got to happen, so this is happening. It's just very much like Clark's born, or Kal-El's born, and then he's talking to the council as if Krypton's already dead. Then Zod immediately attacks the council. Like, you're getting shown all these things to kind of get you to the arc of where Clark sets out as soon as he gets to Earth. So I think they do a really good job of, setting the stage for having Krypton be an important piece of Superman lore. It's actually really well done.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great because it's the origin piece, right? And the origin piece in these superhero movies and shows is always overlooked. Like, how many times do we have to see Uncle Ben get shot?
Right.
How many times do we have to see Bruce Wayne's parents get shot? How many, over and over again, it's like the origin story, you always fast forward through. But in this, it's kind of necessary.
Right. I agree. I think it's more than necessary. I think it's kind of integral almost to this plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. So we get to Earth, and Clark is picked up by Kevin Costner and his wife, who is Diane Lane. Yeah,
I really like the non-linear storytelling here.
This is interesting, right?
Intercutting the flashbacks, and again, just that kind of indie feel that this movie has, and the first parts of it, it's refreshing almost, because I think the Batman's going to do a similar thing once that comes out in March. I think it's going to have it still has that grandiose feel of the origins of some of these characters, but at the same time, it's really grounded, and it's really understanding of this could happen if this were to happen, So, yeah, we kind of cut to him. He's doing odd jobs. That's really interesting, because usually with Superman at this point in his career, he would probably be at the Daily Planet by now. He probably would have been in high school, then to college, meeting all these people, Lana Lang, I forget what his name, Pete Ross is in this, just like he is, he's starting to meet all these people. So by this time he would be with them, but this is a different approach. I remember one of the sells with this movie is, this isn't your grandfather's Superman. This isn't the Christopher Reeve Superman. This is a different take take. This is a more grounded take. This is more real life as it would be. It's not like that comic book, Action Comics #1. This is like a Man of Tomorrow or a Man of Steel, like a Man of Tomorrow. Like this is much more.
Well, I mean, and that has Nolan's fingerprints all over it, right?
Yeah.
Because that was kind of the hallmark of the Dark Knight trilogy, was that it wasn't, you make the joke all the time, like you couldn't put Christian Bale's Batman in the Justice League movie because he would get destroyed. Right. Like he's not built for that because it's what if Batman existed in the real world? And this is similar insofar as this character can exist in the real world because he's an alien from another planet. You know what I mean? So that really, it's hard to present that premise that this is Superman in the real world, because as soon as you put Superman here, it automatically becomes an extra real story. Right. So
yeah, and I think another testament to that is Henry Cavill's more subtle performance, because that's another argument against
divisive.
This movie. Yeah,
it's a divisive portrayal,
because what happens for him is people say he's kind of stale, he's kind of bland, but I kind of appreciate it more of like he doesn't know who he is yet. He doesn't have Lois Lane to kind of define him and kind of explore more of his humanity, because up until this point he's from Smallville. He's just this kind of kid that's coming into his power, and then he kind of, for this perspective from this film, he goes out into the world instead of going off to school from what we've seen. So I really enjoy that he kind of goes off into the world. He tries to figure this out himself, because I love the loner mentality that he has. It's a very kind of like wandering protagonist feel that somebody like Wolverine would even have.
Yeah. I'm with you through Man of Steel, and then you get through Batman vs Superman, and you get through Justice League, and his demeanor never really changes.
Right. That's something that we're going to talk about once we get to Man of Steel, because again, I've said this to you in the past. They should have split that movie off and had the whole idea that they had in that scene where should there be a Superman, they should have had that be its own movie. And I always say it should have been Brainiac, it should have been Lex Luthor, and possibly you even could have left Lex Luthor in Doomsday, because it would have been like, are you this monster from Krypton? Like, these are the beings that come from your planet, and then versus these humans that maybe not want this. Like, that should have been its own arc in of itself, and then they should have had the Batman movie separate. And this billionaire that has no powers, like, that's been fighting crime for so long, like the end credit scene probably should have been the mid scene where they see each other for the first time. Like, that's probably what it should have been.
Yeah, we'll talk about the mess that became Batman vs Superman next week.
Good moments.
It does, but it was not everything that they wanted it to be, or maybe it was, and maybe that's the problem. But we'll talk about that next week.
Jesus imagery is strong in this movie. I just got past the Jesus imagery is very apparent. I mean, that's a Zack Snyder staple.
It's a through line, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand it in a movie like this. Once you get to Batman vs Superman and beyond, it starts to, because like we said, next week we're going to talk, you have an Ultimate Edition of Batman vs Superman. Like, there's so many different cuts of these movies, which happens, but for Man of Steel, at least this is the cut I'm pretty sure that they wanted out there, so. Yeah. Right. So, like, right now, I'm on the sequence where he's starting to come into his power when he's a kid. Like, it's just those smaller kind of handheld camera moments. Like, it's just, like, the relation is just so refreshing for me, and just so, like, I told you, there's a genuine nature about this movie that I really enjoy. So, I kind of hope they keep that. I wish they kept that going towards Batman vs Superman. And then, even if they did do Batman vs Superman, which they did, the clash would have felt a little bit more organic, because it would have been like, you're really misunderstanding me, because there were so many plot elements they were trying to juggle in the first 2/3 of Batman vs Superman. So once the conflict came, it felt super forced.
Yeah, that movie is very inorganic in a way that this movie is, and I think that's, not to look ahead, but that's where Batman vs Superman disappoints, because there are a lot of human and organic moments in this movie, particularly between Clark and his father.
Yeah. Both his fathers.
Yeah, I agree. So Kevin Costner is basically the one who's like, you shouldn't be who you are. Right. Which is a weird stance to take, but ultimately makes sense.
Yeah, it's not something you would expect from, not any superhero, the superhero. Like, it's not something you expect.
And it's kind of the antithesis to with great power comes great responsibility. Right. It's with great power you shut your mouth and work in Kansas.
You need to show great restraint. And you need
exactly.
to hold yourself back. And I love the sequence where he saves the bus and immediately his father, Jonathan Kent tells him you shouldn't have done that. And it's just those little moral debates. It's like I said, it's something that I do like about Zack Snyder, but it became more than it can be handled in Batman vs Superman and Justice League, where it's the smaller moral debates. Like, should I have just let those kids die? Because now it's not just me showing off my power. Now I have to deal with this. Now this turns very real very fast. And it's not... I love this movie kind of turns into like an alien... it is a full-out alien invasion, but I kind of like that heavier sci-fi aspect you kind of feel once you get into the third act. And it's like these little setup moments I think are really good.
Yeah, and that's ultimately the moral crux of this movie is, well, when is it okay to be my true self? Right. Jonathan Kent's argument is, well, never. Right.
And another thing I'm going to add to that to kind of even, bolster that is I love how alien, because a lot of times when we show alien stuff, the CW is probably culprit number one. It's very human-looking alien tech, but, this is very alien, especially the Krypton sequences. It looks very off-world and very different than everything else. And, that, I really like that for that point of, when am I going to be able to reveal my true self? How much different am I from them? Or are we kind of more similar than we give ourselves credit for?
Yeah, which is, circling back to the origins of Superman and what makes Superman work, that's the point, right? Is for as different as he is from everybody, he's also the same, right? In the sense that he can be the best of us, even though he's not one of us, right? And I think that's the point that this movie's trying to make.
And Batman vs Superman, it was getting there. It really was getting, especially like I told you before we hopped on, Lex Luthor's dinner party scene. It started to get there because then it jumped into him saving that little girl from the burning building, and then it was just, it's I love that frame of him ascending out of the hands and all the hands touching him. That's Superman to me. Him, flying around saving just subs that are that's Superman. All those little beats are Superman. So I think they're starting to understand the point, but then you add Batman, you add the Justice League setup, you add Wonder Woman, it starts to pull away from because they should have kept this through line, because even for the Avengers movies, there was the through lines were through Captain America with the Tesseract technology. It was through Iron Man with his relationship with Nick Fury and what happened in Iron Man 2. It's through Thor because of Loki, obviously. So, they're keeping these through lines throughout. That's why that thematic storytelling is a little bit more tight.
Yeah, and even if you want to talk long-term with Marvel, you talk about Captain America Civil War. Right. How the Iron Man Captain America conflict was built from that first Avengers movie on. Right. There's a natural friction between those two characters that builds and builds and builds and accentuates through Age of Ultron, and then eventually it explodes.
It's so much more of a portrayal too, because you also get the add of it's so dynamic. There's layers to it. It's not just they just don't like each other. They do respect each other and they do like each other to an extent, because it's like having a teammate. That's my teammate that I will die for. I will, but he did something to portray me. It's not that simple. I love how kind of multi-layered that is.
Yeah, in Batman vs Superman, the conflict's too simple.
Right, it is very simple. It's very simple, and it's also very easy to spot. I don't understand how everybody fell for this so easily. You're dealing with the world's greatest detective and one of the most powerful being in the universe. How is this so simply, they're just immediately at odds?
Yeah. And like I said, we'll talk about that next week.
We got to talk about the moment.
So speaking of humanity, Superman's humanity is kind of tethered to Lois Lane in this, portrayed by Amy Adams. Again, more kind of casting what ifs for that. Kristen Stewart, Zoe Saldana, Olivia Wilde, Mila Kunis, all considered for the Lois Lane role. That was ultimately given to Amy Adams.
I think they made the right decision. I think that
was
agree. I think she needed Lois Lane, and obviously we just got done watching Superman and Lois right before this, and you even made Lois needs a certain amount of power to her, this internal power, and I think Amy Adams gives that off. And I said this to you, the issue that I have is she has it. And it needs to be Amy Adams. Obviously, American Hustle, Arrival, Nocturnal Animals, Amy Adams she's a beast. She's one of the greatest actresses in Hollywood. She has this. As soon as she shows up to the scout ship, in this movie.
Yep.
She's got that power. She's got that journalistic drive. She has like this inner kind of drive to do whatever she needs to do to get the story. She immediately loses it and turns into the damsel in distress, and it's a little bit disappointing because Lois should be somebody that kind of helps his endeavors. Like, I even liked how they kind of used Zendaya as MJ in Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, that was a perfect example of like tweaking an arc a little bit, because I even said to you too, I think before No Way Home, I said, please, I hope they don't go with kind of like this teen angst that they were. I mean, obviously you need teen angst, but kind of like that, you know, what's her name from Breakfast Club? Like, I hope they don't keep that the whole way through. And they don't. Like, obviously she still has elements because that's who she is as a person, but it didn't overshadow her love for Peter in that movie. So same thing here, but then again, she has it and then she immediately loses it. Like, she gets attacked by the scout ship and like, she just turns into completely just...
She turned into like early times Lois Lane, where she's just there to be rescued.
Right.
When you were talking about MJ, I was thinking a great character from superhero films that is the antithesis of, I use that word a lot today, Emma Stone.
Right.
In Amazing Spider-Man, both movies. She is never portrayed as damsel in distress. No. She's right there with him, helping him. And I think going back to Superman and Lois, what Elizabeth Tulloch's Lois Lane is, she's a partner.
Right.
You know, she has her B-plot moments where she's by herself, but then she also helps Clark a lot.
Right.
Especially the episode we just watched.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah. Definitely.
You know, she doesn't back down from him. She's not afraid of him, even when sometimes maybe she should be. But like I said, I mentioned earlier the standouts. Amy Adams started strong and then just kind of falls into the same typical rescue tropes.
Yeah, and it's funny because now that I'm thinking more about it, she does sort of break pieces of it. Like, it's just because how good of an actress Amy Adams is. She subtly breaks it at points, but I mean, the end scene, the scene where they go up to see Zod, like, each moment she needs to be saved at each moment. I mean, she does have that little moment with Jor-El where she's kind of, you know, snaking her way through the ship, and she kind of, you know, is using, but she has Jor-El there to kind of, you know, guide her through everything. So,
and sometimes it's distracting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You know, I'm fast forwarding again to Batman vs Superman, but she gets in trouble during the fight with Doomsday,
right? Exactly.
And he has to fly off and save her,
right?
And like that's one of those elements that it's breaking tension for no reason,
right? Like, this is not what we should be focused on right now.
Exactly.
Right, because this movie's already overloaded. Again, that's just going into the bigger issue, which that movie had way too much to kind of juggle, because you're playing catch up, because it's your second movie versus Marvel's, whatever, 14th or 15th movie. Right.
So the main conflict here, as we alluded to, Zod, him and his crew was thrown into the Phantom Zone, because that's what you do. When you commit crimes.
Yeah, when you
Krypton.
you perform a coup against your entire planet.
Yeah, we could learn a thing or two from that, but I'm just going to leave that there. So, the inescapable Phantom Zone that people always seem to be escaping from.
Shout out Supergirl.
Zod and his crew escape the Phantom Zone, and they're not happy.
I actually really love the line that Michael Shannon gives, because I think he says the instrument of our damnation was our... You know, it saved us. And like, this movie is truly poetic. Like, this has got a lot of great poetic moments, and that's one of us. Like, the thing that was supposed to destroy us. Because so what happens is they perform basically a coup. So when you're on Krypton, Zod basically says, like, I'm with you, Jor-El. Like, the planet's about to die. Let me get the Codex. We'll work together, and we'll start a new Krypton somewhere else. And Jor-El's like, no, because you're a psychopath that's just killing everybody.
And Zod's like, and
yeah, right. And that's another big moral debate about this movie is like...
Is Zod wrong?
Yeah, is Zod wrong? And I guess that's basically the moral debate for I'm glad that our villains are starting to evolve beyond on bad for bad's sake. Like, Zod actually, that's not a bad point in terms of, like, evolution of, like, hey, man, like, we can, you know...
mean, it's a little Hitler.
Yeah, it is. It's very Hitler. It extremely is.
Was Hitler wrong? Question mark.
No. Yep. Yes. Yep. We're not even going to joke about that. He was wrong. We're not going to joke about that. It's not a joke to have. But again, comic book universe. Like, I mean, he's got a slight point.
Well, he just wants a new home for his people.
Yeah, that it was like a really, even the scene where he, acclimates to Earth is a really beautiful scene when he's fighting Clark, because he says he's just like, everything, you were born, like, you had I don't have free will in my mind. The only thing I have is I was born to be a military leader, so every single action I've taken since the moment I was born is for the betterment of my people through means of forcible means.
Maybe try something else, Zod.
He can. He can. That's him. This is Zod.
Yeah, and this is kind of where his plan is kind of, you just see that he's just a psychopath and not doing it for altruistic reasons. Right. He enjoys the battle. He enjoys the benefits of what Earth gives Kryptonians. Right. Because otherwise, just pick another planet. Right. Maybe. But, as soon as he gets there, he's like, ooh, yeah, we got a little something extra in this place.
I mean, with that being said, he actually is a really good counter to Clark, because he's more flamboyant in the way he kind of, he says the things that he said. He's very sure of himself in the role he has, versus Clark's trying to figure it out, because it's the free will versus predestination conversation. Yep. Then. So it's I already know that I will end any world to make sure Krypton continues, and Clark says it's not that simple. Like,
it's not your decision.
Yeah, it's not your decision.
You can't just do that. You can't just show up to this planet that's inhabited by billions of people and just decide that it's yours now. Right. That's not how this works.
And boy, does he try.
Yeah, so he's got the world engine.
Yeah.
Brings the world engine with him.
Right.
Cool name.
Right. So before that, obviously you need to have your hero moment, your first outing, your first night out. So basically what happens is Amy Adams is introduced. You find out that there's some movement in the Arctic, I think. Mm-hmm. So ice is shifting. Something's happening. There's something in the ice. And then they do a scan and they find out that thing is 18,000 years old. So from the Krypton sequences that you find out later in the movie, Krypton was sending out scout ships to, do what it says in the name, scout other planets, because they knew Krypton was dying. So they're trying to figure out if there's another way to do what they used to do in the past, which you find out is they used to colonize other planets. But obviously they stopped doing that in turn for, making artificial children just to kind of supplant themselves. But you get here, the scout ship's there. Clark uses his little key, his MacGuffin key, and the scout ship is his father's consciousness is uploaded to it, and it takes off because, that's his car now. It's his new whip. So you get to what I say is one of the most beautiful superhero sequences of all time. I don't think that's up, in my opinion, I don't think that's up for debate.
I think you're right.
Pure cinematic beauty. So his father tells him, you can be the bridge between two worlds. Like, you can be the one that kind of gives them hope and gives them the man of tomorrow, basically. So he gets his classic red and blue suit. How you like that suit?
I like it a lot.
I think
I think it got better over time.
It just got a little bit more refined.
Yeah.
I don't know if this guy's just keeping suits on deck in there. How many Superman suits they got? Need that Kryptonian drip. That Kryptonian... yeah, their outfits are on point. So yeah, we get to the flight scene, and I mean, this is actually the perfect time to talk about Hans Zimmer's score, which I have the hot take about, because I think this might be... What's his best score? That's the question we gotta ask ourselves.
Man, there's so many to choose from.
Yeah, you have Gladiator, which is a really, really amazing one. I mean, Dune, I know Dune just came out, but that's another, top tier one that he's had. What else do you got?
Interstellar.
So for me, I think Interstellar is the number one.
I think you have to make a delineation between what's his best and what's his most iconic.
And then I think you can branch out to the third one and be what's the most impactful too, because what's the most impactful for the story it's trying to tell.
Because the most iconic one is probably Pirates.
I think it's The Dark Knight is the most iconic one.
Yeah, it's probably those two. Probably. I mean, who doesn't know the Pirate score, but also who doesn't know the Dark Knight score?
Right, exactly. And then I think the most impactful one was probably the Interstellar one, yeah, in terms of the actual plot of the film mixed with this. But I think for me, in terms of the impact for the story it's trying to tell, I think Man of Steel sneaks into that top three in my opinion. I think Pirates is right. I think Man of Steel and Pirates, for me, battle a little bit. How great this score is. Like, I think because this movie isn't as well received as the other movies that we just talked about, where the score kind of gets lost, it's like, this is a truly special score. Like, this is one that I listen to on a regular basis. Like, it's so intricate. It's so thought out. Like, it's so much deeper than people give it credit for. So, yeah. Just coupled with some of the scenes in this movie, it really just kind of ramps up the whole cinematic experience.
It's a perfect marriage. Like, there's just those scenes where it's a perfect marriage of visual and music.
Right.
And the flight scene is one of them. Right. I think.
Right. And I always said about the flight scene, so there's some really, it's like in the flight, because the flight scene's it, but inside of the flight scene, because it's only like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, there's so much in that 3 minutes. It's like, it's him kind of standing on the ice, and like, I love the moment. Like, this is something I really like about Henry Cavill, that subtle type of acting. Like, he just stands there and he just closes his eyes and just but right there, like, again, show not tell, like, you're feeling the sun, like, you're feeling all that power that you can absorb into yourself. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing what they were able to do in this sequence, and kind of just, now you're starting to get into that bigger kind of echelon, that upper echelon of you becoming, the world's greatest superhero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and embracing it, more importantly.
Right.
Because that goes back to, what Jonathan Kent told him. You shouldn't embrace that side of yourself. But Clark is like, no, I should.
Yeah.
I should. And that's important that, he makes that decision, right?
Yeah.
That decision is not made for him. That's always, we go back to great power, great responsibility. Like that line is so ingrained in Peter Parker's psyche. Like, he feels like he needs to be Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Like, Clark makes that decision for himself despite what his adoptive father said, and taking more cues from his biological father.
Right.
And that, you can be greater, but you can also, like you said earlier, the bridge, right? You shouldn't use your power to lord over these people, but work alongside them and help them. And that's ultimately what he does.
Right.
To combat his second greatest enemy in this movie, next to tornadoes, General Zod.
Do you just want to get that scene out of the way?
So that's Jonathan Kent's undoing.
Right, so we get to basically the Smallville scene, and I don't mean like they're in Smallville, which they are. I mean like the actual, like, he's supposed to be... Who's the guy that played Superman in Smallville?
Tom Welling?
Yeah, Tom Welling. I'm sorry, Tom Welling. I forgot your name for a second, but basically his Tom Welling impression for a little bit that he does. Mm-hmm. So it's the Jonathan Kent death scene. There's some comics he's dead. There's some comics he's alive. You gotta kill Kevin Costner, I guess, in this movie. So they're driving. He's having his teen angst moment where he says, "You're not my real dad. You're not my real dad."
He Uncle Ben's him.
Yeah. And then a tornado appears out of literally nowhere. I guess all tornadoes kind of appear out of thin air, but I'm not a meteorologist. I talk about movies. So yeah, I really like this movie. I like this movie probably more than 99% of the population of this planet does. However, I'm with the general public on this scene where they could have handled this in such a better way. And I think the stand-in is the Uncle Ben, and the stand-in it's the counter, is Uncle Ben and Bruce Wayne's parents. Why those two versus this, why those two work, it's because you feel powerless. Like, you're this great big hero that can't help this. Like,
in this case, however,
he can help this easily.
Yeah. And I don't care how morally against I am my son using his superpowers. If he can help save my life in a tornado, I'm going to want him to.
Right. It should be...
I'm not going to die to prove a point.
Right, like, if he died in, like, a car accident, like, that would have been so much more impactful, because it would have been, like, imagine the setups, like, I'm gonna take the car, like, no, I'm gonna take the car, and then, like, or, like, Superman's like, I want to drive, whatever, like, something so simple as that, like, and, like, they get into an accident, and, like, he dies while he's driving, like, something like that is so much more impactful, because, like, you are the most powerful being on this planet, but you couldn't stop your father from passing away, like, something that small would be so much more impactful than the potential that he could have saved him right there.
And it's like, just didn't, because his dad didn't want him to?
Because of the moral debate, where this is, like,
that he wasn't even totally subscribed to. Like,
right, he's not. And that was the moment where he super wasn't subscribed to that notion. Like, that was where he kind of rebelled against it. I guess the counter is like, okay, like, I understand, now I get it. Like, but just at that moment in time, like, save your dad, man. Like, save him.
Yeah, what's he gonna do? Get mad at you afterwards?
Right, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry I saved your life, Dad.
You already saved those kids on that bus. Like, we've already been through this.
Yeah. Sorry I saved your life, Dad.
Right. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, after the tornado is dealt with, now he's got to deal with Zod.
Yeah.
Who's trying to terraform the Earth.
Really good sequence. I think it's the horror sequence of this movie, and I think it plays off really well. So it's like the alien invasion part where everything just like, so the entire Earth basically, the scientist that every single superhero movie has, he says something's orbiting the Earth, and they're like, excuse me, and they're like, yeah,
that's no moon, that's a space station.
Yeah, shout out Star Wars. But, so basically the entire Earth goes dark, and Zod says, I'm looking for someone named Kal-El. And again, the moral debate kind of ramps up, like, should I turn myself in? And, like, is he just still going to kill everybody? And it's like, that's the call to action for him. It's like, I need to stand up against this guy that probably knows what he's doing, is more powerful than I am, but it's just, I have the power to do something, so I'm going to do something about it. And, like, now I'm making the decision for myself. Like, I got my fresh new suit from my last scene. Like, it's time for me to kind of step up and be Superman.
Mm-hmm. And become Superman he does. Mm-hmm. Big fight.
Right. But first, he turns himself in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting sequence. We get introduced to General Slonlik, and spoiler alert for those people that didn't watch Justice League, the Snyder Cut. That's Martian Manhunter.
Yeah,
right. Interesting. Kind of. I don't want to say I called it because I have no concrete proof that I called it, but ever since I watched Man of Steel X years back and Batman vs Superman, I'm like, yeah, he's definitely somebody. He's got to be somebody. He can't just be some rogue general. That's not how this works.
And then he's just some alien.
Yeah.
We're probably never going to see again.
You want to talk about that sequence?
No, I want to save it. I want to save it for Justice League.
Oh my god.
When we do the Justice League one.
It's so good. He's just like, hey man.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm the Martian Manhunter.
Bruce Wayne's like,
cool.
All right. Yeah. Just sign your release form at the bottom and we'll get on our way.
Here's your name tag.
Here's your name tag.
Such a weird scene.
Coffee
oh man. So yeah, he turns himself in to the government. He's like, "Hello, I'm the man that's being looked for. It's me." And they're like, "Yeah?" And he's like, "Yep, but Zod's gonna destroy the Earth."
Right. So the flashbacks, again, are used pretty well because there's a flashback between every single decision he makes in this movie. There's a flashback right before it. So, like, whatever moral decision that he has to make or, like, decision for himself kind of in his character arc, there's a flashback. So, obviously, the scene with his father passing away is right before he goes to the church and asks the priest, like, I'm the guy they're looking for. Should I turn myself? Like, should I act or should I hold my power back?
Well, what do you want to do, Matthew? The priest says.
Right. Oh, that's the wrong guy. That's the wrong Matthew. So yeah, he gets and then the scene right before he turns himself in is him getting bullied in Smallville, and the bully asks him, like, are you gonna stand up and fight, or are you gonna sit there and hold your power back, or are you gonna stand up and fight? And stand up and fight he does. Mm-hmm. And now we're in the third act of this movie.
Yeah, time for a big fight.
Yeah.
Christopher Maloney's in this movie, by the way.
Yeah,
just want to throw that in there. Shout out Stabler. Yeah. Him and Lawrence Fishburne are in this, and I'm just like, all right, yeah.
Oh yeah, so I actually like Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White. He's a jerk. He's the worst, and he's like I mean, Perry White and J. Jonah Jameson are the counter for each other.
Yeah,
the stand-ins, but I kind of like Lawrence Fishburne here.
Yeah, again, he's fine.
Yeah, there's no harm, no foul. He has a really good scene at the end where he's holding one of his employees' hands when the world's ending, and it's kind of that to me is supposed to mirror, like, again, the Superman, like, anybody can be Superman in the moment if you choose to, do the brave thing and kind of self-sacrifice.
I just feel like it's a little distracting that it's Lawrence Fishburne.
You think so?
A little bit,
I
yeah.
can see why you say that. I get that.
He's good. It's just a little distracting.
Yeah, I actually...
I'm like, oh, crap. Lawrence Fishburne's in
on the
this.
rewatch, I think it's his voice that kind of gets me for there. So on the rewatch, I kind of do appreciate kind of that he's there, and I think he actually counters Amy Adams pretty well too. I think the two of them kind of are the perfect, like, battle for like, you shouldn't do this, Lois, and she's just like, I'm gonna do it anyway. And
right.
It's like, all right, fine.
Right.
Just don't do anything stupid.
So yeah.
Right.
Third act. Like I said, Zod's ready to go. Deploys the world engine.
Right. So right before that, it's super important. They, like we said, Clark turns himself in, and Zod now kind of tries to sell him on the entire idea of...
As a villain does.
Right. That Krypton should come back and should be great. And then Clark's like, maybe we shouldn't kill my friends and family. And Zod's like, well, you're not on board? See you, man. And,
if you're not with me, then you're my enemy.
Right. only a Kryptonian deals in absolutes. So yeah, they're on the ship, and then Amy Adams gets free on the ship, and she's running amok, and she turns the air freshener off, and so basically they're on that ship. They don't have their powers, obviously, because it's running on Kryptonian air and not Earth air. So
sure,
right. I told you I watch movies. I'm not a science guy. But yeah, so Clark doesn't have his powers, and then they flip the switch, because a big part of this movie is the chemistry of Kryptonians and like the anatomy of how they can't. It's red sun versus yellow sun. So basically, like, Clark has his powers because of this. So, but it takes time to. I actually kind of like that, like that it takes time to adjust, because I'm pretty sure in all Superman media he just gets there and it's just immediately like, oh, I'm super strong. Like,
yeah,
it takes some time to like acclimate to you having this much power, because basically it's like that scene from Daredevil where like all his senses are hitting him at once. Like, it's the same thing. Like, right. It's too much
input. Yeah,
too much input all at once. So Clark, it turns off. Clark's like, oh yeah, I'm about to go crazy. And
they asked me if I'm back. I'm thinking I'm back.
Yeah, he's back. Heading with the Michael Jordan 45. I'm back. So last scene he has with Russell Crowe before Russell Crowe, bites the dust and Zod takes over. I love that scene where he's like, strike this panel, he hits it, and he's like, Lois Lane's falling to her death, basically. And like, again, the Jesus imagery is on strong. He's basically, Jesus pose, but it's well shot, man. It's well shot. Like, I can forgive it because of how well shot it is.
Yeah. And so we roll into it.
Saves Lois Lane for the third time in this movie.
And just get out of the way, Lois.
They got 2 more times. I think I counted it. I think she gets saved 5 times in this movie, and this is the 3rd one.
Just go home, Lois.
Yeah, Lois. You don't need to be here. I get it.
Yeah. You can't help. You can't help this situation.
Yeah, you got a crush on this alien guy.
Yeah.
So does half the planet, Lois.
Yeah. Leave it.
Yeah.
Leave it be. Let him fight Zod.
Yeah.
And his crew. Zod and Zod's crew. Zod and the Zodettes.
You want to talk about Jor-El?
Yeah.
You hear the rumor that she's coming back for this Flash movie? Oh, I think
it's a rumor. I think it's confirmed, is it not?
I think Michael Shannon's also coming back for this Flash movie.
They're both back.
What is this Flash movie? What is this? This is a Flash movie, right?
Allegedly.
Yeah. Are you sure this isn't is this just Batman vs. Superman 2 and they're just not telling us?
Yeah. So
what is this movie?
Yeah. Zod and the Zodettes.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Gal Gadot was offered that role.
Yeah, I'm glad she didn't take it, because obviously we got Wonder Woman out of this, but man, Jor-El, she is an issue. And then again, the moral debates in this movie keep rolling and rolling. She kind of tells us, like, we have an evolutionary advantage over not only the humans but you too, because it's not more of like the actual physicality of it. It's like you bought into their ways of being this kind of passive, like, I have no second thought about killing you right now. And like,
yeah, so she's like, Zod is like calculated psychopath. Mm-hmm. She's like savage psychopath.
Yeah, she lets it fly. She's one of my favorite characters from this movie.
Which is like typical like villain hierarchy.
Right.
You have like the calm, calculated, allure, then you have like the loose unit that's like off, like their lieutenant is like the one that's like, I can hurt you, but she's the real issue.
Right. Yeah, and she does a great job at that. There's nothing held back from her performance. It's really good. It's really refreshing too. And am I excited for this Flash movie now? Just because I get to see Michael Shannon and Jor-El again?
Yeah. I just segueing to that real quick. Is the rumor that they're going to be Supergirl's parents?
The both of them?
Yeah.
Like Shannon and...
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I thought I saw that somewhere.
That would be kind of interesting if they had a child and that child was just like, oh, what would even be cooler? And then this is kind of, even sadder, because I don't know what Henry Cavill did to Warner Brothers for them to never use
talk about
again.
that at the end of this.
Yeah. But it's even sadder because that would have been interesting if Henry Cavill's Superman was like, I'm going to take you under my wing and show you. Like, imagine even better, like, he lied to her and be like, you're my daughter. And then she finds out, like, you know, the first guy that tried to end the world is actually my father. Even better.
Yeah. So, yeah. Big fight. Superman versus Zod and the Zodettes.
So they fight in Smallville. So this is actually pretty important. They fight in Smallville first,
and then it escalates.
Yeah, I kind of like that sequence where he's just like he's like telling everybody just get inside because this is not going to go well. And I think this is the biggest complaint about this movie, and you see it.
Wanton destruction.
They break everything in sight, which I get because you're dealing with the most powerful individual. And I mean, if you look at this as like a 2-movie arc between this and Batman vs. Superman, they kind of address that and deal with it as like, you know, he's not going to do that. Like, he holds himself back. Like, this is his first fight with like anybody because even in like the whole point of this movie is like, he hasn't fought anybody because he can't. He'd kill them if he really fought somebody. So yeah. He's been holding back. So this is him not holding back.
Right.
So, you know, he needs to rise to the occasion. And sadly, Smallville and Metropolis are
get leveled in the process.
Yeah, Smallville can rebuild. I don't know how much time. Isn't it like 18 months in between Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel?
We're talking billions and billions of dollars of damage.
Yeah, I mean, billions is light. Whatever the number is after trillions is probably the amount they had to pay. I mean, every building. You know, pause here, go watch the third act, and then come back to us, because those world engines are doing damage. So basically, they have the world engine over South Indonesia, and then there's the world engine over Metropolis, so each end of the Earth, and basically what it's doing is, like, slowly the gravitational field is growing until it covers the whole Earth, and basically it's turning Earth's atmosphere into Krypton's atmosphere. So, Zod might win. It's looking bad. And again, I don't like the fact that they just straight up, you know, leveled your city in your first movie. Like, of the Avengers is, you know, how to kind of do it without, you know, everything being completely destroyed. But, man, the tension it brings, I think, is the best part of it. Like, it's a really tense sequence. As soon as the first one hits, like, the clock's on in this movie. And, like, I know I've talked in the past about, like, enjoying movies that aren't really, like, you know, the clock's ticking, like, you know, we need to save this by this, but like I said, that tension piece with like the world engine going, I think it's kind of cool. I kind of like that. Yeah,
then Clark, you know, kind of figures like, if I just destroy the world engine, Zod's just gonna go home, right?
Right.
That's not what happens.
Oh, it's a really great sequence where so basically they have an idea. So the ship that brought Clark here, if he crashes that into the world engine, then it's gonna create a black hole that's gonna suck the you know, Skybeam.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah. 2010 Skybeam from every superhero project.
Yeah.
So basically, if he destroys that wall, if he crashes in, it's gonna, you know, create a black hole, yada yada yada. Everything's cool. So he gets a really great sequence. He goes down to the south. He goes down to the Indonesia one. He's fighting tentacles, I guess, because aliens.
Sure.
And it's looking bad for my man, because obviously he's acclimated to Earth's atmosphere, so he needs to kind of, you know, gain the ability to fight in both and be Superman in both. So obviously, because he's not from Krypton, it's kind of tough. So he's there at the South or the Indonesia one, and he just, that hero moment, man, it can easily be seen as cheesy, but when he lifts that hand up and he kind of like decides for himself that I'm going to Superman this, like, whenever anybody gives you the Goku versus Superman debate, I always think about this. Like, he just willed himself to, you know,
be stronger.
Yeah, be stronger than the atmosphere, which is ridiculous as me saying this out loud, which I never have had to before. But yeah, it's just, like I said, it can easily be cheesy. It can easily be, you know, kind of, you know, eye-rolling, but it's just, again, the score coupled with Cavill's kind of like subtle approach to Superman, like, it's really nice.
Yep. So yeah, he neutralizes the world engine, the military, the American military, world military, American military.
It's the American military. if Michael Bay taught me anything, it's the American military.
They send Zod's troops back to the Phantom Zone, and then surely Zod's just going to go home, right? Mm-hmm. Well, he doesn't have a home, but he's surely just going to leave Earth now.
And then we get into a really good monologue from him. So basically, they're fighting. They fight. So then the American military crashes his ship into that one. He saves Lois Lane for the fourth time. I'm still counting. Saves her for the fourth time in this movie.
And then Zod's like, you know what? I'm just gonna kill everybody now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the crux of the moral debate. It's just like, you're gonna betray your people, basically. I will kill every single person here. Like,
and then Superman said, "You will try."
Yeah, basically, is this Star Wars? It's got a lot of similarities.
That Anakin Obi-Wan monologue can transcend genres.
You guys better wait until we review the prequel trilogy, because that will be a full-out comedy episode.
So yeah, I'm gonna kill everybody. You will try, and it's on. Yeah, it's on, son.
But before, like, that monologue that he gives him before is really, like, that's like I don't see villain monologue. Right, I don't see anybody besides Michael Shannon giving that. Like, he tells him, like, everything I do is for the greater good of my people. Like, I'll kill every last person on this earth with my bare hands if that's the case. And then he tells him, like, I was trained since the moment I was born. I love the line. He's just like, where were you trained, on a farm? Like, I'm going to dismantle you right now.
Yeah, it's him holding the dust in his hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could have built a new Krypton in the squad, but you chose the humans over us. I exist only to protect Krypton. That is the sole purpose for which I was born, and every action I take, no matter how violent or how cruel, is for the greater good of my people. And now I have no people. My soul, that is what you have taken from me. Much more emotionally delivered by Michael Shannon.
I don't know. I thought you did a pretty good job with that.
But nonetheless, yeah. So that's where Zod's point of view is you... See, this is what villains do. They gaslight you. Mm-hmm. He's like, you've taken everything from me. Mm-hmm. Superman's like, what?
Yeah.
You were trying to take everything from me. And Zod's like, no, that's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to save you.
Okay, so now that I'm thinking about this movie, another kind of thing I'll say against it is there's a lot of Krypton stuff that doesn't get to... It gets paid off, but it's very quick the way it gets paid off. And it's not nonsensical, like, not as much as where you get into Batman vs. Superman, but it's more like, things are just, they're kind of thrown at you, and then, like, you get to all these Earth sequences, and then it's like, remember that piece of information from the very beginning of the movie? It's back. But then it doesn't really, because the Codex is the big one, because Zod kind of needs that Codex to, fully terraform the planet, but what Jor-El did is, it was a skull, I guess? I don't know how that works. The Krypton... Sure. Doesn't matter. Jor-El kind of, infuses it into Clark's DNA. That's what he does. So that way Clark...
It's the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Oh my god. Oh no.
With the Spiders.
I still love this movie.
Anyway.
It's fine. It's not fine, but, I'll give it a forgiveness for everything else from the other parts of this movie. But yeah, I understand I'm watching the third act, just fast forward a little bit. I do... I get the way they're hitting each other. Like, that's what would happen if, it's the immovable object versus, it's... If I hit something of equal power and us being the most powerful beings in the universe...
We're going to knock over a couple buildings?
Yeah, I think some buildings are coming down. But,
yeah. And then Zod catches a bad case of the neck snaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's another... Superman kills the main villain. And, I mean, if you look at this...
You thought this was going to be a Zack Snyder movie and he wasn't going to kill the villain at the end?
Yeah.
You got another thing coming.
Yeah, you're lucky some other heroes didn't die if this is Zack Snyder property.
Yeah, there was only one, so...
Right. And he came back to life anyway, so it canceled itself right out. So, yeah, so it gets to the end... Amy Adams is there. Again? I don't know
Go
why.
home, Lois.
Yeah, Lois, not safe for you. You're the guy you're talking to is in a battle of the ages.
Yeah.
So yeah, snaps Zod's neck. He says, I will not stop. I'll kill every single last one of them. And Henry makes a business decision, and he makes a young first fight business decision. And I mean, there are good points in Batman vs. Superman, but again, it doesn't follow this through line because now you have to deal with the other biggest superhero of all time with Bruce Wayne. Now you have to deal with that and the Justice League setup. Now you don't have time for some of, actual character development.
Yeah.
Because now this whole thing of, now I don't think they ever address him killing Zod, which is probably... what you should have spent more of the movie doing.
The only time it's ever addressed is the fact that Zod becomes Doomsday.
Right. And it's not even that's just more of Zod's body's there. It's not even the actual action.
Yeah, there's no impact behind it being Zod. It could have been anything that became Doomsday. They do it just hey, isn't this cool? And we're like, not really.
Right. I wish that would have been more of Lex Luthor's argument. He was able to snap somebody his neck. Somebody that's like him. He was able to kill, imagine what he can do to every single one of us. That should have what's been the entire argument.
Yeah.
So, which, again, I guess the other side to the coin of that is I actually kind of enjoy the beginning of Batman vs. Superman from Bruce Wayne's perspective of, like, what this being could do to this planet. Like, I know I'm a human, but I need to be the one that stands up for all humans in this case.
I guess, but he's smarter than that.
Yeah, he is smarter than... Well, he's smarter to get tricked by Lex Luthor. Like, it's not...
But he's smart enough to understand nuance.
Right.
Like, he's smart enough to understand, like, yeah, this guy leveled inside, but he didn't do it by himself.
Right, yeah, like, do you not have, like, the context to understand he was probably trying to protect everybody?
Right.
Like, he was the one that was trying to stop everybody.
Yeah.
So,
like, maybe just have a conversation with him. Like,
right.
Hey, man, you're a little dangerous. Are you sure you're good in the head? Clark would be like, yeah, I work at a newspaper. And Bruce Wayne would be like, oh, yeah, you're all right.
Right. Cool.
That movie could have been 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
Could have been a short.
Yeah, it could have been a short. Batman vs. Superman as presented by Funny or Die. So, yeah, we get to the end of this movie, and he's starting to become more of, like, that, Man of Tomorrow type of, Superman, where it's like he confronts General Swanwick because General Swanwick's trying to, get drones to see him and, like, hey, I want to see where you hang up your cape. And he's just like, nah, I'm not going to tell you who I am, man. I'm Superman. That's it. That's all you need to know. I'm here
Wink.
for you. Yeah, I'm here for truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. Thought I was going to say the American way, didn't you?
Yeah.
This isn't your grandpa Superman.
And that's, and then he gets the job at the Daily Planet, and he's on his way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he gets the big, Henry Cavill is a good-looking man, so we're going to show it off at the end of this movie.
Yep.
But is that supposed to be Carol Ferris with Swanwick? I'm pretty sure that is, because her name tag says Ferris, so I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Hal Jordan's girlfriend.
Another thread that we're never going to get any resolution to.
I guess they don't I guess that Green Lantern movie was so bad that they don't want anything to do with Green Lantern ever again.
Not even when they give a guy a Green Lantern ring.
Yeah, and then they say, no, John Digglestort, we're not going to give you anything.
So yeah, that movie, it's fine. It's
for you.
You like it better than me.
I like it better than most people. I mean, so I guess I do need to address that this movie just has a huge impact on me. I mean, from the score,
which is fine.
Yeah, we did kind of preface this whole thing with us kind of explaining, like, these properties that you don't have any rhyme or reason to latch onto, you just do. You can't help it, and this was one for me.
And it's not like you're, like, super passionate about this bad thing. Like, it's from my perspective, it's fine. Like, it's good. It's probably I'm not going to say the best. No, maybe I'm going to say the best DCEU movie.
The best DCEU movie, period? It's the best DCEU movie is probably the Suicide Squad.
Yeah, it's that. Wonder Woman,
the first one. And I guess Shazam gets the third spot in terms of those three.
I think this might be better than Shazam.
I mean, if it was my ranking,
I know it was your ranking. I'm trying to figure out my own ranking.
Should we wait until we do Justice League to give our DCEU ranking?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to shock some people I've already shocked some people this week, but I'm going to shock some people for the ranking.
So, let's talk about the superhero cape in the room. Superhero cape size elephant in the room. Why did we never get a standalone sequel to this?
It's just, it's insane. It's just, Superman has so much lore. Again, as much as we love Spider-Man, it's him, like, Superman is the one that everybody else is based off. So it's just kind of disappointing that, again, I don't know what Henry Cavill did. Like, from interviews and stuff, he seems like Andrew Garfield. Like, everybody loves this guy. Like, he's just such like a nice and genuine human being in, like, real life. Like, this guy builds computers with his husky on Twitch. Like, everybody loves this guy. Like, he has the look of Superman. Like I said, I think he gives a pretty subtle performance that's actually pretty impactful in this movie. Like, I don't know what he did to get, outed by Warner Brothers, or if this is just a bigger thing where Batman vs. Superman didn't work and they kind of hit the panic button and said maybe he wasn't, where in all actuality the issue is writing is the issue.
I think they just blew it, man. I think they took from this and they were like, we got to catch up to Marvel. We're doing Justice League now.
Right.
And Superman and Batman in particular suffered from that.
Yeah.
Because
you have these titans you have these absolute...
Because they were able to get Wonder Woman off in between all this.
But that felt so much... That was handled much differently than these movies because of I mean, your director's a little bit, you have a different director.
And I think it helps them with Wonder Woman in particular because they were able to tell a story that took place before all of this.
Right, yeah, so it wasn't tethered to this world yet.
Right, which helped it because they couldn't have, I mean, I guess they could have done a bit Batman, but I guess from their perspective, it wouldn't have made sense to. Or maybe they just didn't want to.
Right.
I don't know what the case is.
I think the case is, like you said, I think they were playing a game of catch-up. I think, because, so, more context for Batman vs. Superman, because this is where this ultimately, that's where the climax of this whole thing is.
This is Batman vs. Superman is essentially the sequel to Man of Steel.
Right, it is. And like I said before, there's sequences in Batman vs. Superman which are supposed to be the direct results of this movie, but they just pick so many weird ways to go about it. And I mean, we'll save the Jesse Eisenberg stuff for next week. We'll save the Doomsday stuff for next week. But what this comes down to, it's like, you really are, it's 2016, so the other thing is the other superhero franchise that you're battling is doing the same thing that you're doing.
They're doing Civil War.
They're also doing the superheroes fight each other. And once you're looking at it from that perspective, you're taking away from the most important thing, and that's actual credible story. Like, so much of Batman vs. Superman does not feel credible. It doesn't feel earned. There's just so many through lines that just don't land because it doesn't make sense of why this is the focus of this movie.
And they, the characters are flat.
Yeah, they really, and it
strips Batman vs. Superman strips so much away from this portrayal of Superman
that
it
does.
He's almost unrecognizable.
Yeah, he doesn't have, the only thing that he has to do in this movie is be sad because the world hates him. And then everything goes through Batman in that movie, and it's just such a weird thing because why didn't you just make a Batman movie and then just have him at the end be like I said, the post-credit scene should have been, oh my god, the biggest city in the world just got absolutely leveled.
Yeah. We're gonna workshop Batman vs. Superman next week because there's 100 different ways they could have done what they did.
Right.
But they just wanted to play catch up, and they've put their two big guns in the crossfire. And like I said, it strips so much away from what this movie did for that character. He's just, by the time you get to Batman vs. Superman, he's just a loaded gun. Yeah, he's just a weapon.
It's so sad too because again, the big thing, it's so we'll talk about it next week, and you already know because you know me how much I really like Ben Affleck as Batman. I think his Bruce Wayne is one of my favorite ones. It's he has a lot of small moments that scream Bruce Wayne to me, and his Batman's so brutal. It's just, he feels the closest to that Arkham series Batman that we got in those games. He really does have that. What he gives off to me is more of the aura of Batman, of this guy that's been in the city terrorizing every villain or every criminal for the last 20 years, and you feel it. That's I think you would agree, that's the best part of Batman vs. Superman is Batman himself, the arc that he kind of goes on, this older Bruce Wayne, which we haven't seen before. Every Bruce Wayne is either prime or young. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a good episode next week. I really am enjoying dissecting these movies, and obviously, like I said, Man of Steel has such an impact on me. For me, it's this, and I think Loki snuck in there, but this, and probably Captain America Winter Soldier are my upper echelon to me, and Guardians of the Galaxy are probably my three favorite there's something I'm probably missing in there, but they're those are my three favorite superhero movies of all time. So
yeah, it's just so hard for me to separate what this movie presented versus where that character ended up going.
Yeah.
And
right. Especially, it's the opposite of what the Spider-Man franchise did for the MCU. What they did, because it that movie makes everything retroactively better, where Batman vs. Superman makes this retroactively not as,
because you're what happened? What happened to this guy? Where, how did he end up? And the closest, it's funny, both the original Justice League and the Snyder Cut both kind of all of a sudden at the end of the Snyder Cut and the end of Justice League, the Superman that you thought this guy was going to turn into, he just is there.
Yeah.
And you're how did this happen? Right. How are you this guy now? Right. It's we missed Man of Steel 2 between all those movies. Right, yeah. Where did this guy come from?
And again, just to stay,
and then he's gone.
Right, yeah, and then he's just everything's back to normal. There's no repercussion. That's something that Marvel does really well. There's always consequence to every action somebody takes. I guarantee you, the only thing that earned Steve Rogers respect back for Iron Man and vice versa was the death of Tony. it was so impactful. Like, everything that happens is so thought out. Like, it needs to be like something like this. And I'm just thinking like more comic and like future storytelling. Like, as a movie, like as this movie alone, and obviously for me, this is a really good Superman tale and a really good superhero tale. And it's a really fun's probably not the right word, but it's a really like eye-opening one. And it's a really kind of, it's based a lot in morality and kind of the ethics of superheroes, which I think is kind of cool. But as a whole, like getting to a more of a franchise, it like I said, talking like more comics, it kind of hurts because it feels like they just said, oh, we're not touching any source material now. We're just going to leave this character. Like, we talked when I read All-Star Superman. It's like, I think it's one of the top 10 greatest comic books ever written by Grant Morrison. It's just, it understands why, it's like a meta kind of thing where it understands like the character of Superman, not only in universe, but to world media. Yeah. Like, it's so important of a character that he is. And like, when you get down to the last two scenes in this movie with General Swan, like, and where he goes to the Daily Planet, it had the bones of it. It started to get there where it's like, oh, Henry Cavill's going to be like, you know, like Robert Downey Jr. or like Chris Evans is Captain America and Iron Man.
And then it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, he does nothing besides kind of mope in Batman vs Superman. It's just,
it's like, a shame.
Yeah, it's really, but I do like him a lot as Superman, man.
I will say, silver lining, in a weird way, it paved the way to the Superman that we have now.
Yeah, Tyler Hoechlin, and you definitely understand that. They definitely were very aware of what happened in the DC movie universe, and they said, well, let's go. And the first episode of Superman Lois does that absolutely like the best I think that I've ever seen it, where it understands again what Grant Morrison did with All-Star Superman. It understands in universe how important Superman is, and to world media how important Superman is.
Yeah, and it's weird like watching that first episode of Superman and Lois, especially the way it's shot and some of the imagery. It almost feels like they purposefully are like taking the torch from what.
Yeah. There's like a lot of like lens flares that are in Man of Steel. Like there's like, it's kind of graded, it's like graded, color
like that
graded
scene,
kind of,
the scene where his sons are confronting the idea that their father might be Superman, and he goes into the air with the truck. I'm like, this scene could have been a Man of Steel. You know what I mean? Obviously not that exact scene because he didn't have sons in Man of Steel.
Right.
But like the imagery and the way it's shot, I'm like, did they do this on purpose?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it feels like they wanted to pay homage in a weird way to what the ideas that Man of Steel presented, and then just took it in full force.
Yeah, Even so, Zack Snyder, I don't think we talked much about him. Like him and Christopher Nolan being your executive producer, but there's just, like I said earlier, like there's something so genuine about what Zack Snyder did in this movie. Like I said, like I keep saying it, but those first 2/3, like kind of that indie way they were doing everything, like that smaller world that they were kind of building. Smallville, obviously, they're in, but it felt so much more kind of just the relation piece was so good for me, and like it was working the whole time. Like I felt that Superman, like this guy that said, like, I'm now getting my call, like, now I'm going to start to use my power for good. Like, the core of what makes Superman a Superman, like, what makes superheroes, like, that's where you can feel it in this movie. You really can. And that's the biggest compliment that I can give this.
Yeah, I agree. But this is definitely the most nuanced version of these next 3 episodes that we're going to do, because these next 2 movies, there's a lot to talk about behind the camera, in front of the camera,
in the studio, in the media,
yep,
the fans. So the
fans, yeah. This movie's kind of untouched by all that, which I think gives it a kind of nice little slot. Yeah. In these series of films, like it's the one that felt like the most by itself,
right?
Which I appreciate.
Yeah. So that's Man of Steel, one of my favorite comic book movies of all time.
It's good movies.
I think I sold you a little bit more on it being a little bit better than you remember.
Yeah, that's probably true. There's still, like I said, some issues I have with it, as far as, like I said, the later movies really dampen my experience with this one. Yeah. And that's my fault for knowing like where this goes, and where it goes is pretty much nowhere.
Right. Well, that's kind of the hanging nail for continuous storytelling and kind of, having arcs and that span movies and universes.
Yeah, and
to play off of everything.
Going back to the Marvel comparison, obviously, because why wouldn't you? Nothing about Tony Stark's journey to Avengers Endgame makes me look at Iron Man 1 and go, man. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm not disappointed going back to those prior movies and going, well, this character didn't really end up where I wanted him to. All the arcs feel fulfilled, and they feel satisfying, whereas this, I look back at Man of Steel and I'm like, damn, this is the best of it. This is as good as it gets for him as Superman, and he's in 2 other things. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the disappointing part, is that we didn't get a follow-up to this properly. But other than that, that's going to do it for us this week. Did you do anything? See anything?
I watched Passing on Netflix. So Ruth Negga and Tessa Thompson give, some of my favorite performances, I guess technically of last year, because I believe this was a 2021 movie when this came out. So actually, Rebecca Hall, which you may know from Godzilla vs. Kong, what was her character? She was basically, I forget who she was. She was with the little girl where they were with Kong. Mm-hmm. So Rebecca Hall directed this movie, and I was like, cool. I like when actors direct stuff because they usually have John Krasinski. They usually know what they're doing because they're on sets all their life. Some of them just, go behind the camera. And this movie takes place in the 1920s. It's basically about one black woman passing for a white woman because it's the 1920s. And Tessa Thompson's character does not do that, but she meets this girl that she used to know. But when she meets her, she's passing as a white woman. And man, this movie is an absolute emotional punch. And Tessa Thompson, I think, gives the best performance of her career. It's probably a career-defining performance as well. She's exceptional. I know they shot this movie on film. They shot it in the 4:3 aspect ratio, which also Macbeth was shot on too. And it's such this you never feel safe, which I get. It's the point. You never feel safe as in that same way. But it just, in terms of performances of the year, in terms of cinematography for last year, it's some of the best that you can ask for. I really like all these stories that we're telling, through the avenues of Netflix or whether it be a big production, whatever it may have you, it doesn't feel like the 80s, 90s anymore, where we're kind of, even other smaller budget movies, it's not your Spielbergs or whatever, now there's so many avenues of storytelling now. I think it's great. And we wouldn't get movies I feel like we wouldn't get movies like this if it were the 80s or 90s.
No, because it would never get made. It wouldn't be big, it wouldn't be big enough. It wouldn't come from a big enough studio to make distribution.
Right.
That's why, people as much say streaming is killing cinema. It's not, it's killing I shouldn't say it's killing the business, but it's not helping the theater chains and the theater experience, but it's not killing cinema.
Yeah.
Because more people than ever are able to tell stories they want to tell. And I think that's great. Right.
And I guess the other side, which I think I'm turning into a Martin Scorsese stan I know you probably saw what Ben Affleck said over the last couple of days about Argo, how Argo would never be released in a theater if it was made now. And he's not wrong. He really isn't. And it's like that cinema experience because I've been going to the movie theater a lot more. I found a local theater that shows a lot of indie movies where I saw Spencer, I saw French Dispatch, I saw Tragedy of Macbeth. And it's great, but at the same time, it kind of is bad because I can't go to the big theater that everybody goes to. And the only movie that's big that's showing right now is probably Spider-Man. So it's I understand the other side to that, which again, I don't want to be this old soul, cinema's dying, we need to go back.
Also, in a way, I feel like we need to step outside ourselves for a second and not realize, because we all know what kind of time we're in. We're reminded of it every day. But I want to think maybe this is me being optimistic that these movie theaters are only running the big budget movies because they know it's the only thing right now in the climate that we're in that's going to get people into the movies.
Right.
And I'd like to think in maybe another 2 years or so, when hopefully everything that's going on is behind us, that they'll be more receptive to getting these other films back into movies and promoting them, because people will be more comfortable, packing a theater to see an Argo type
It's all
movie.
about your general audience, man. And I mean, as much as people say they hate the Fast and Furious movies, there's a reason those movies make $1 billion. There's a reason these superhero movies make $1 billion. Like a guy like me, I always say, like, I love I was built on, like, my fiction base is built on superheroes. That's, like, where I credit most of it to. That's probably why I like Man of Steel as much as I do. But I definitely hope we don't stay in this age of that's the only movie, like, the quote-unquote theme park ride movies, which, again, that was a quote taken out of context, and I hope people understand that. But I hope we don't live in this age forever where it's just that. I hope what we get to is the variety of everything, where I can in one weekend see Spider-Man and then go see French Dispatch in the same fail swoop. Like, that's where it really should be, because, again, I guess the whole moral debate of this episode is, having multiple sources of streaming of media and making sure everybody's stories are told.
Yeah, agreed.
What have you been doing, man?
I've been retreading through a bunch of different Final Fantasy games.
What else is new?
So I have decided, I've taken it upon myself to play Final Fantasy 8, 9, 10, basically anything I can get my hands on I want to play, just because I've settled into this niche in my gaming career where I can't play super open world games, but I can play like kind of like guided open world games. Like a game, like I tried to play Skyrim like a week ago and I couldn't do it. I was overwhelmed by the depth of the openness of the world. Like I need something where like I'm know kind of where I'm going and I can't get too sidetracked.
Right.
So the Final Fantasy games have always been the source of that for me. Final Fantasy VII obviously being my favorite game, favorite piece of media of all time.
Right, yeah.
So, and when I was younger, I skipped to 8. I played 9 maybe once. So basically any Final Fantasy game I can get my hand on right now, I'm trying to play through it and experience different characters, different stories, and just, bank information and stuff up until something else comes. That's basically what I've been up to.
Nice. Yeah. I promise I'll play Final Fantasy. I promise.
We're going to have to. You're going to have to, because we're going to talk about it at some point.
Yeah, we will.
Probably within the next year.
Yeah, oh yeah. There's no way we're going to go the year without talking about Final Fantasy. I mean, you had to, inevitably, when we sit through the episode, because if you thought I was bad for this, just wait until we talk about Daredevil, because I'm going to be on a
That Daredevil episode is coming.
Yeah.
Probably closer to when Echo is releasing.
Correct, yeah.
Is when we're going to get to talking about Daredevil in full.
Yeah, so we're gonna have some more episodes like this. So the next 3 weeks are gonna be taken up by the Zack Snyder trilogy and all the trials and tribulations that go into that. By then,
Book of Boba Fett and Peacemaker should be finishing up.
Yes, so we'll cover both of those and probably back-to-back weeks if everything lines up, and then we'll get some more theme episodes. I might throw some polls out there if you guys want us to talk about any. We'll do some more old either TV shows or movies or games or comics. We definitely are going to cover a comic too, because that's my bread and butter right there. So we definitely will do that as well.
And you can find those polls whenever we post them on our Twitter.
What a segue.
I've been on fire today.
That was amazing.
At @ProjectINF_pod is that, where you can follow us. The links to our personal Twitters, I think, are on there too. If not, they're definitely in the episode description of the podcast. The podcast, which you can listen to on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon,
iHeartRadio,
Pandora.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Don't think you can't listen to it, because you can.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere. You can follow us on Facebook, like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram at
The Project Infinite Pod.
Thank you. And next week we're going to continue this Snyder trilogy film retrospective thing. We're going to talk Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Oh yeah, that's going to be great. Yeah. You know where I'm at? So it's gotten to the point in the movie where it's the end, and it kind of transitions to him when he was a kid, where he's talking to his mother at his father's grave. And man, this movie's got a layer of beauty over it that I just can't get over. That's where I think I really love this movie, where he's running around, his backyard with the cape on, and he's standing there with the sunset behind him. The truth, justice, young Superman. Great stuff, man. Revisit Man of Steel. Watch it again.
Maybe we'll just talk about Men of Steel again next week.
Yeah, you know I would like to.
That's the Henry Cavill of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
My God.
Your guy. But yeah, until then, next week, Batman v Superman. I can't wait to talk about it.
You're going to rip this movie to shreds.
Ah, man, I'm ready to go.
And I'm going to have to counter because there's some good moments in that movie.
The Wonder Woman score.
Yeah, good stuff.
Good stuff. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.